My name is Peter Young, and I am the Brantford class of '74, and I want to welcome all of you to one of the Yale Career Fireside Chats, and we're going to cover the education in the COVID-19 environment. I am very, very pleased to have the two panelists that we have today from two different angles. We have Alice Hom, who is the principal of PS 128, the Young Wing School in New York City, which she'll explain the tie to Yale, right? Of the name of the school. And the other is Lucas Swineford, who's Executive Director for Digital Education at the Poorview Center for Teaching and Learning at Yale. So obviously he has a huge job with regard to coordinating all the use of technology and so forth and at Yale, which is obviously a big challenge as you try to open up the school for the fall. So two very good people to comment on this topic, and so I'm very pleased to be the moderator today. Confession is this was actually organized not by me, but by Trish Takemoto, who is one of the 4 volunteers who've been running this program of Yale Career Panels now for 8 years, and I think we're close to 50 of these. I want to just briefly touch on what the program is. We started this, a group of us started this, actually Trish and I started this in 2012 because we perceived that Yale students had a great education, but very poor information about different careers. And so we said, let's find a way to help them understand in a candid way what it's really like to be an architect or lawyer or investment banker or a doctor. We originally thought we'd do 1 or 2, and now we're up to close to 50. The only thing that's different is that a couple of years ago, we started a different series, which this is part of, which is the Fireside Chats on career issues. So rather than talk about a specific profession, it's really focused on an issue, whether it's how do you network, how do you get on boards, how do you manage your careers in this kind of environment, how do you deal with teaching. And those have also been very, very popular. So today is one of those Fireside Chats. The format's pretty straightforward. After my introduction, we're really just going to go through a series of questions. I have the easy part because I get to ask the questions, and the panelists will really share their views about each of these areas on this general topic. Those of you who are the attendees, we're going to have about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A, and in this video conferencing system, you have 2 ways to ask a question. One is the chat box, which I think we all are quite familiar with, and the other is the Q&A function, which is essentially almost identical to the chat box. Feel free to type in questions along the way. You don't have to wait to the Q&A session. If you want to get your question in first, you can type it in early. But essentially, when we get to the Q&A, I'll read the questions for the audience and the panelists, and ask the panelists to respond. So with that, what I'd like to do is first let each of our 2 panelists tell us what they do. So maybe Lucas, you start, and then Alice.
Certainly, thank you, Peter. Thanks everyone for joining. So I am the Executive Director for Digital Education at the Poorview Center for Teaching and Learning at Yale University. In my role, my portfolio expands a wide spectrum of educational activity where technology or educational technology is the common thread. So this includes oversight of our course management system, which is called Canvas. We use that for all of our residential courses at Yale, even in non-pandemic times, as well as other associated platforms. Zoom, which of course has become much more popular in the last 4 months, items like Panopto and Poll Everywhere that enhance even a residential teaching and learning experience. My teams also oversee our relationship with Coursera for massive open online courses. We have a portfolio of 33 courses and over 4 million enrolled learners. We partner with numerous professional schools to offer online non-degree programs, executive programs. You can think of continuing medical education or continuing legal education, just in different disciplines, public health, environment, nursing, for example. And then we also work with a small number of professional schools on managing or envisioning the future, which may include an increasing number of online degree programs or blended degree programs.
Wonderful. So, Lucas, we certainly understand why you're on this panel. Alice, tell me what about your job and what you do?
Okay, so I am the principal at Young Wing Elementary, Public School 124. I started out as a classroom teacher at PS6, which is on the Upper East Side. I taught kindergarten, third grade, second grade, was a math coach, and then became an administrator. I was an assistant principal at Sun Yat-sen Middle School 131, also in Chinatown, District 2, and then have been the principal at Young Wing for the last 16 years. And we are a pre-K to grade 5 elementary school. We started out with almost 900 students when I first started there. And due to the demographics and the shifts in our community, we've gone down to about 660 students. And we have been very affected by the COVID and everything that has happened. And it's been very interesting as to how it changed the lives of our students and also my teachers. So hopefully we'll discuss that.
And the connection to Yale for the name of the school?
Well, Young Wing was the first Chinese to come over to the United States over 100, I think 60 years ago at least. And he got a college degree. He went back to China and brought over students to get educated. And he was very unique in the sense that he married a white woman. He had his Q cut and also the other students. So he was sort of a rebel in his days. And then he went back to China. A lot of the students that came over also went back and became government officials and had roles in education. And his cemetery is in Yale, I believe, in Connecticut at this point.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a connection there with Yale.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start out with the first question. And this is kind of a big picture question, and that is, how has your school, right, and your respective schools been affected thus far with regard to the pandemic? And there are many, many different dimensions of this. I'd like you to just pick the ones that you feel would be most useful, because everything from just the teaching environment and the physical separation to the administration and even the physical space, right? There are lots of different dimensions. So maybe if you could share with us a couple of insights of things you've had to deal with. Should we start with you, Lucas, just arbitrarily?
Certainly fine by me. So in my role at the Poorvu Center for Teaching and Learning, the focus has really been on supporting faculty and to a certain extent students as we pivot to the remote learning environment. If we think back to the spring, what we executed is what we refer to now as emergency remote teaching, in the sense that we found out on, I believe, March 10th from President Salave that I think the first announcement was to say for 2 weeks after spring recess, the students would not be learning in person, but would need to learn online. And it was perhaps 48 hours later that we learned that remote environment would continue for the rest of the semester. So we essentially had 9 days to work with faculty from all across the university to transition their mid-semester course plans from a residential environment to the online environment. We learned a number of great lessons during that time. For one, it reaffirmed for us the resiliency and determination of our faculty and students. By many measures, the spring semester was a success, despite so many unimaginable challenges. And it was a success because of our faculty and students' willingness to be flexible, a willingness to be creative, a willingness to be vulnerable, particularly on the faculty side, to work with our center, to learn about technologies, new platforms that they may not have used in the past. Over the next 2 weeks, our center engaged either in person through workshops, virtual workshops, or emails with something in the order of 1,800 faculty across the school. And really what we were doing, we're focusing on two big picture topics. So the first is, how do we just work with you to transition what it is you wanted to accomplish over the next 6 weeks to the online environment? We were not necessarily applying best practices for online learning. We were not looking to produce any award-winning online courses. We were simply looking to make the transition so that students could continue to learn. However, at the same time, we were starting conversations with faculty, and we were setting up support structures so that if we had to continue this support in the summer, we would be able to do it with much more intentionality. We would be able to work with faculty to understand the importance of course design, to understand which best practices from classroom-based teaching transitioned very well to the online environment. And that is what we've been doing over the last 3 months through a coordinated. Yes.
Lucas, it couldn't have been all smooth, because from my knowledge of the typical Yale professor, they are not they're not the youngest group of people on this planet, but two is not all of them are very technology proficient, right? So that must have been a serious challenge. Younger folks, not a problem, right? At least in terms of being able to operate online, right? They may not have liked it, but so how much of a problem was that with particularly the less technology savvy professors and teachers?
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll say, Peter, is it's amusing that it doesn't always break down according to age demographics. Some of the most engaged and enthusiastic faculty members that I've worked with over the past few years that relates to technology are some of our more senior faculty members. The thread that they have in common is that they're wonderful teachers. They understand they constantly need to evolve and adapt. And that is to say, I've also had some very difficult conversations with young faculty who are averse to technology, who refuse to use it. So it's just to me, an amusing anecdote to say it doesn't always break down cleanly along age demographics. But you are 100% correct to say not every faculty member was enthusiastic about this. There'd be a couple of things that we would speak with them about. You know, for one, are there ways that are, from a technology perspective, low bars to engaging with students? So you can still, over a short period of time, have engaging conversations with students using readings and email. If technology were the concern, we have a staff at the Poorvu Center that does not focus on technology. It's the Faculty Teaching Initiatives team that focuses on best practices for teaching and learning with no concern to technology. So they're able to have really deep, meaningful conversations with those faculty members about their goals for teaching, full stop. When you're in the classroom, what is that you're trying to accomplish, and how can we transition that to this environment in the easiest way possible?
Well, let me interrupt though, and let Alice start, and we'll be going back and forth anyway. So Alice, very different perspective, right? I guess your average age group is slightly different from Yale College, right?
Right. We actually, this happened like right after Lunar New Year. And then we were hearing a lot of things about China and the sickness, and kids were coming in with masks. Parents were very concerned. There was also some discrimination happening in the community that impacted our families. And then, just like Lucas was saying, March 13th was when we got notified that, schools were going to be closed. Staff had to return to school in order to get professional development, get all their supplies. You know, we had to figure out how to roll out technology devices for our students so that they could work at home. It was a matter of different people in my staff collecting all the iPads, laptops, you know, asking families to figure out a system to sign them out. And then getting teachers on board also to take professional development quickly, you know, crash course on how to use Google Classroom, how to set up their classes, how to get the kids and the families online. We have over 37% of our families are immigrants and also non-English speaking. So teaching them how to put an app on and how to navigate to get online. I mean, this is a funny anecdote, but at the time it was not. You know, I had my parent coordinator, my family worker, my pupil secretary, all videotaping the different app and showing slides, pictures, and showing them pointing to where to press this, how to open this. And then we had to send it out to parents because they didn't understand how to get on Google Classroom or Class Dojo.
So now you also probably had the problem that obviously, given the demographics, not every family has laptops, right? Or a good internet connection, right? So what did you do about that?
We, as I said, we collected all our laptops. We pulled out all our laptop cards. I think at that time we had 50 or 60 laptops. We had iPads. I collected all the iPads I could from all the classroom teachers. I said, we have to send them home. We created a sign out for the parents because, you know, we have to keep inventory. And, you know, kids were home. We had parents coming in to a classroom, mask on, gloves on, having them check to have all the cables and everything, and then go home. And it was like constant in, out, in, out. Teachers, we gave them like 2 or 3 days getting to know how to create their classrooms. They got time to gather whatever materials, and I actually let them leave like 2 days and just stay at home and work on planning. And then, you know, once we started the classes, it was a lot of, you know, trying to get the families and kids, because again, it was the timing of having parents working at home while kids should also be online was a struggle. And we had a lot of kids who were not showing up. And if they were showing up, they were eating their breakfast. They were in their pajamas. They were lying on their bunk beds. So the structure of it was very loose. You know, we learned a lot after the 4 months. And as we're preparing for the new school year, we're working on plans of, you know, the non-negotiables, the expectations that if kids are not showing up, we can't count them as being present. And we taking attendance for them, it was like almost 20, I would say like 10-hour turnaround time. If they did the assignments at 12 o'clock and submitted it by that evening, we would accept it and give them, you know, credit for it. But it was, you know, parents were complaining, saying, I have to do my work, I have to watch my child as they're trying to do their homework. And it is a struggle. We know that for pre-K and kindergarten kids. You know,
also older ones as well, right?
Well,
now, I have a question actually for both of you, because, and this has come up many times, which is not all courses are easy to do online. You know, obviously, if it's in English, right, that's one thing. But what if it's a science lab or an art course or whatever? So I guess, could you address that? Because obviously both at the university level and at the kindergarten and elementary school level, it's the same thing. You've got courses that are, you know, some just require hands-on, right? Can you both comment on that?
Alice, would you like to go first, or shall I?
You can go. take turns.
Okay, a little back and forth.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a great point, obviously. And I think we're trying a couple of different things at Yale. So for one, as you may know, there are courses, studio-based, lab-based courses that will be able to have a limited number of students in person. And we will see how that, of course, progresses. However, we cannot educate the large number of students that would typically take studio or lab-based courses. Now, I have to say, in some of the professional schools, such as the School of Art, I'm not entirely certain what their current plan calls for. I haven't been updated on the latest in the School of Art, meaning how many courses will they delay until next semester to see exactly what the situation is from a public health perspective. How many courses will they run in person with limited students? But what I can say is on the Yale College side, for lab courses, we're trying to be as creative as possible. We adopted a new piece of software that is a lab simulation software. Again, it in no way fully replicates the experience of being there in person, but it is at least something to get the students used to some of the lab conversation that you're having and experimenting in a simulated lab environment.
And the good news is you can't blow yourself up, right?
Exactly. Some of our other science faculty members are actually conducting lab experiments now themselves or with their lab assistants and recording them so they can at least share video with the students. Again, it is not the same experience, but it is providing some insight and education so the students will be prepared for a time when they can come back and have hands-on in the lab again.
Yeah, and I know some schools are actually shipping simple lab experiments to the students and so forth, things that are actually, not dangerous, but, practical.
Yes. And we are seeing some of that in the School of Engineering as well at Yale. That's a great point.
Alice, how about you? A different dimension. Obviously, they're not doing, physics experiments, but there are a lot of things that require maybe more hands-on, right?
Well, I know that a lot of our teachers had to learn quickly tools like Screencastify, Pear Deck, Flipgrid. And once they learned how to manipulate them and use them, they found them extremely, useful. They want to continue that since we have to do that for the remote learning students this year. A lot of them also used YouTube in order to record some of their lessons. The science teacher, art teacher, initially found when they had kids in Google Meets, 25, 30 kids trying to listen to the lesson. It was impossible, especially with the little guys. So what they decided to do was first record themselves with the directions, with the explanations. And then when they had their Google Meets, it was to really navigate the concerns, the problems, the questions that students had. Again, with our music and art teacher and our gym teachers, what they did was do a lot of recordings on their own. And then they made it a link in their Google Classroom, and the kids would be able to access it pretty much anytime on the weekend as well. And again, for the little ones, we use Class Dojo, which is an app. And we thought initially that would be useful and simple for our families because it's our communication board with parents. And also, there were features like it does translation automatically. So we could post something and it would automatically translate. However, it was hard for families to send back the homework assignments.
Right.
They either took pictures and then tried to share it with the teacher. We're learning the best practices over the summer, and we're trying to work with different techniques and different ways of providing families with that orientation and help them understand how to return assignments for their kids and all the different tools. Over the next 2 weeks, I plan to have parent Zoom orientations in order to teach them, how to access things. And the other thing was during the 4 months, we started out with Zoom, then there was a problem. I even got Zoom bombed during a parent orientation. And then they shut it down over the Easter break. And then we had to use Google Meet, which was struggling as well. You know, their features were not, were very glitchy.
Yeah.
And then after May, they allowed us to go back to Zoom. So it was like back and forth, and parents were very confused.
Now I'm going to shift gears for you. We've been focusing a lot the last 20 minutes on online, but the reality is we're going to be facing a whole bunch of things. As educators will be facing situations where they're either asked to do in person or some hybrid or otherwise. And obviously that's creating a lot of stress for those of you who are involved with helping to run these schools. And not only is it stressful because how do you create a safe environment if it's hybrid, right? Or all physical. And the other, of course, is the frustrating part has been they keep changing the rules, right? And so now you plan for this and then they change the rules and now you got to plan for that. Tell me, both of you, each of you, talk about the other two combinations and how you had to deal with it. One is hybrid, right, which is part in person, part in online, and the other is perhaps fully physical. So how do you deal with it in a COVID-19 environment?
So from my perspective, I think as we've spoken about, my team is not focused on the public health side of how do we implement an in-person teaching experience or a blended teaching experience, the residential side of that. What we're focused on is working with faculty to design their courses in a resilient manner so that regardless of the medium, they're able to deliver that course. Because one thing that we knew in the summer is September 1st, best case scenario is the pandemic is under control and students can go back 100% in residence. Well, we learned last semester that we better be ready at the drop of a hat to shift to a fully remote environment. So we really focused on being adaptable so that we could make that shift to the remote environment. What that also allows us to do is focus on the way you would teach a blended course so that you're not only teaching to the students that are in person, but you're thinking about those remote learners, those online learners, as you are delivering your Zoom session. And you understand that the course is happening outside of just the physical presence where you happen to be. But from a public health perspective, Yale has taken extraordinary measures, has done a phenomenal job from my perspective on setting up guidelines for students and faculty so that if they are able to come and learn somewhat in person, that they are as safe as they could possibly be in the classroom. But as far as the specifics, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And now, Alice, you have to deal with the whole thing, right? Regardless of if it's physical or online, whatever. How have you had to deal with that? And obviously, how are you planning for what will inevitably be, the shift to either hybrid or all in person while maintaining safety, right?
Well, with our families, what we did was a lot of surveying in the last month, just to find out which they would prefer. The DOE also did a survey. And then, based on that, not all families participated. So we're assuming that if they didn't fill out the form, they've chosen hybrid, which means that they're going to come in to the school. And it would be either for our school initially, we did the 3-day, 2-day, 2 cohorts. And then there would be a full remote, staying at home. Now, as we're looking, my AP has been looking at the numbers while I've been away, and it's like we may have to go the 3 cohort route and the 1 full remote, because we also have about 7 teachers who are not going to be coming into the building. So how do we accommodate those kids who are in the classroom? And the numbers also, we have gifted and talented class. We have a class that has ICT kids, special ed kids. with, so we have two teachers and they have to do co-teaching. And then we have gen ed classes. So how do we accommodate those special students when a teacher is in remote with 17 kids and there are 17 kids in the classroom? You know,
all well behaved, right? Just as if the teacher was there, right?
well, in a classroom, it's no more than, you know, because of the social
Yeah.
distancing,
Yeah.
it's no more than 10 to 12 kids, depending on the size of the room. So that's why you have group A, group B, you know, they'll
rotating.
3 or 2 days. Right now, the union and on the teacher side and the principal side are fighting that we're not ready because there's just so many unanswered questions about scheduling for the students. You have, you know, union regulations. There's no answers, and they would like to have schools push back until, you know, a few weeks so that we still have to get the teachers into the classroom to set up their rooms. And that means the desks. We have to set routes in the hallway for directionality. We have to work on getting the PPE, which a lot of it has not been sent to schools yet. They come in drips and drabs. We have to talk about, you know, health checks, random health checks, either in the classroom, eating in the classroom for all students. We have early dismissal so that families can pick up their kids and, you know, try to avoid crowds in the subways, and also allowing teachers, you know, to go home a little early. But then there's a question of the plan.
So it's just it's a piece of cake, right, Alex?
It's like, you know, hopefully no one listening is with the DOE, but it's, you know, they have these demands, like they want to know how we are contacting families on a daily basis. And, you know, on my end, every day from now until August 28th, I'm going to put 0 because we cannot figure out how to schedule the kids. So we cannot tell parents at this point what group or, you know, when they're coming in. So I think, I believe the DOE is really trying in good faith to set up the schools in a safe way. But they are, you know, hamstrung as well with not knowing how to do this.
Now, do both schools, Yale and your school, what's the rule or what philosophy you're following about whether teachers have to, right, take an assignment to be, you know, physical? I know that probably there are different positions by the union. There are probably very different views about the teachers and professors. So how is each of your schools dealing with the issue of teacher choice with regard to in-person teaching versus online? Lucas, do you want to start?
Certainly. At Yale, it is completely up to the faculty member or the instructor how they would like to teach, how they're most comfortable teaching. They have the ability to make that choice.
Yeah. And then it makes it really tough to schedule courses and let students, because there's so many moving parts, right?
Well, I think the schedule has still come out as it would normally. If a faculty member is going to teach remotely, there are still synchronous sessions for that course. So they still had to identify and be assigned, you know, for example, a Monday, Wednesday, 11:50 to 2 p.m. teaching spot. And students are this week in the process of selecting their courses. So even when they're remote, they're still on a schedule.
Yeah. Alice?
Teachers who want to teach remotely, they have to have a medical accommodation. They are not allowed, you know, childcare leave of absence, or, you know, that as an excuse to teach remotely. Many of them would love to be home to teach remotely, especially if they have their own kids at home, but the DOE is not allowing that. So it's either medical accommodation. In lieu of that, some parents are taking a year leave of absence without pay as their choice. We've heard of other teachers retiring early so that they don't have to deal with it.
Yeah. So it's really a challenge, right? Because you can't force people to do things. You can put some constraints, but you can't force because it's a health issue. So it's really a challenge for everyone who's managing schools. Um, so here's a very important question, or at least I think it's important. We all know that being in the classroom or being in a school or being in a college, so much of it is your interaction, the students' interaction with each other, socializing, meeting professors, so forth. And I know one of the huge issues for all the schools, whether it's elementary school, high school, college, or graduate school, is this missing component. How do you accommodate trying to capture at least some of this in-person interaction? So tell me, I don't know the answer, but I'm not in the education business, but how are each of you trying to deal with that? Or are you just sort of saying, there's a lost component, there's not much we can do about it? Alice?
We are, focusing on social emotion during the first month and a half of school. And that has been, based on the fact that a lot of kids have trauma-based, kinds of barriers. And many of our students have lost grandparents during the COVID time. And a lot of them are like stuck at home. I had a Zoom meeting with my 5th graders who just graduated and wishing them well. And I asked them, how many of you have been outside? And a lot of them saying, no, they just, they're stuck at home. They're going to stay remote. They miss their friends, but they're scared. They don't want to get sick. They don't want to die. So we use in our school ruler, which is, I think it's Yale, right?
Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you for the cross promotion. That was completely unplanned.
Yeah, so we've been doing that for the last 3 years with our own staff. We do the mood meter, and many of our teachers use that to start their class. How are you feeling? And the kids use a word or they use the color. So, and we use a lot of books. I just bought like 6 different books about, why are we wearing face masks? Why is it important to socially distant and clean hands? A lot of health directions, but also how are people feeling? And also, it's a lot of just talking to the kids. For the kids who are going to be in school, it's going to be really hard because they have to sit at their desks for pretty much 4 hours. There's not going to be much movement.
Yeah.
And it'll be extremely hard for our brand new pre-K and kindergarten students who are just coming in. Again, it seems like at most 8 to 9 kids are choosing to come in for each cohort. So it's very limiting, and they don't see their rest of their class unless it's going to be on a Zoom meeting at some point.
So Lucas, how about the Yale perspective?
Yeah. So obviously this question about social interaction, collisions of ideas, as we talk about at Yale, is very different between elementary school and Yale, because Yale is a residential experience where so many Yale alums fondly recall those conversations in the dining hall or sitting in the courtyard with their colleagues talking about a particular topic. When this conversation comes up, I think this is a good time for us to acknowledge with the faculty members when they ask about this or the students, to acknowledge that none of us want to be in this position, and
Right.
to say that no one is asserting the idea that online education, although extremely effective in many ways, can completely replicate the experience of being a Yale undergraduate or even a Yale graduate student. But that isn't to say we should give up on the idea. And we work with the faculty members to try to establish an even greater sense of community with the students in the online environment at the start of the course. So taking some steps such as pre-course surveys to try to understand how the students are feeling, what their learning environment is, to make a connection earlier and stronger than they would over technology may perhaps lead to that sense of community in the classroom.
Yeah.
And we hope that will lead to organic conversations through Zoom and, of course, whatever app students are using now to communicate. We hope we'll see that. But quite honestly, Peter, we don't know the impact of this. We won't know the impact of this whole time period on students for quite some time.
Yeah, and actually it's particularly a challenge for a lot of the sort of like the professional schools. For example, you know, I went to Harvard
Yes.
Business School, and look, let's be honest, although, you know, you want to learn about marketing and finance and so forth, a huge part of why you go to business school is the connections and the friendships you make and so forth later on. And so those schools are really struggling because they have a lot of students who are just deferring because they say, look, you know, even if you do online, I can't build the same kind of relationships and connections and networking that I either would have, right? And they're either deferring, and in some cases they're saying, wait a minute, I don't want to pay the full tuition because I don't think I'm getting the full, and that's really a big challenge, right? And it's hard to, hard to deal with that, right? Of course, Alice, you don't have the problem of people asking for reducing the tuition, right? So that's good, right?
No.
So that's one of the few advantages of your position, right?
But what they are asking is, you know, like to limit, I guess, purchasing of items because they don't know how things are going to be. So I took on the task this year of buying as many notebooks and folders and whatever, crayons and things from the school end, so that when the kids who are in person, that will be already set up, you know, families did not have to go out and
go buy them, right?
You know, so we would do as much of that as possible. And the most we asked them were like Clorox wipes, which is out, you know, disinfectant, baggies, things like that, that would help them, you know, carry things back and forth.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to be unfair to Lucas because I'm going to ask a question that Alice can answer, but you can't, all right?
Great.
That is the parent dimension, right? And the family dimension, which is much more uniquely what you have to deal with because, you know, at Yale, people go to Yale, they leave home, they come back during breaks, but basically it's a residential experience. In your case, Alice, this whole pandemic has created a whole host of strains on parents and their experience and how they manage their careers and watching the kids because the kids are there. They can't, let's face it, school is secondarily daycare, right? Because that's where they're safe. So talk about that dimension because I know from our previous conversation about this has been a real challenging area.
Yeah, during the springtime when parents also were remotely working and they had their own kids to deal with the lessons, you know, and sometimes it was a matter of only one laptop or two for a family that had 4 kids or something. So I would get messages and I would have to talk to them personally about, you know, trying to make accommodations. Parents wanted the teachers live streaming for the 5 hours so that they didn't have to deal with it, but we can't expect that of our teachers. You know, at most we ask them to do some recordings and some check-ins, you know, for the SEL, you know, and that's what we sort of made them do after the spring vacation. But it was very difficult for families. So I know one of the questions that came up was about bandwidth and devices. You know, during the summer, we advised all parents during our orientations and we put it on our school message board. You know, if your child needs a laptop, an iPad, order it now, you know, before it shuts down, because now the DOE is expecting the schools to provide them with the laptops that were, you know, returned from the graduates, which is not very much.
Right.
And the thing is, these new iPads that the DOE are providing or were providing would have hotspots so that multiple devices within a household could be, you know,
Could be
using.
linked. Right.
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 But,
Right.
again, when this all happened, we had to, they made an agreement to provide free Wi-Fi for families in shelters and in places where they didn't have, the Wi-Fi. Parents were using their cell phones, and it was like they were trying to allow their kids to use their cell phone in order to do the homework, and then trying to send it. And it was, very difficult for a number of our families. We had one family who was being taken care of by the aunt because the parents were working outside of the state, and she would not come down to pick up anything for the child, work packets, anything like that, because she would only come down once a week in order to get groceries and things like that. So, we then made accommodations. Okay, if you can just have your child say something to the parent coordinator every day, we would count that as attending,
Yeah.
So we try to bend the rules for the most part, but, this year it's going to be a brand new year, and we have to be a little more, forceful about expectations and, routines, and also turning back assignments so that, kids will get a real grade. They adjusted the grading policy last year to either be meeting or needs improvement. There was no grade. So this was a problem for our fourth grade parents in thinking of middle school.
Boy, I wish I had, I was going to school now. That would have been a lot easier, right? But, it does say, though, one thing's for sure. I hope a lot of those parents, if they use their cell phone, they have an unlimited plan, right? Because it sounds like it uses a lot of data. I have a different question I want to ask both of you. And I remember about 5 years ago, Peter Salovey, or 4 years ago, Peter Salovey gave a speech, and I happened to be there. And he was standing at the podium and he said, and this is before pandemic, obviously. He said, education is going to change. At some point, teaching isn't going to be someone like me standing up at a podium, right? Giving a lecture, so forth, maybe using some slides or whatever. It's going to change in so many different ways. So, and that's independent of pandemic. So let me ask you this, which is, now, we've been focusing on what adjustments that Yale and Union School have gone through for the pandemic. But clearly, through this experience, you also have some views about how some of these changes are going to stay on, even if the pandemic goes away, right? And how education will change because of this. So let me ask each of you to comment about, as you think ahead about school from your current experience, how do you think it's going to change? And are some of the changes that are happening now because of the pandemic, are they going to have a long-term effect, a long-term presence? Lucas?
Yeah. So I think the direct answer to your final question is yes. There are some changes that we're seeing that we know are going to have a long-term impact. I think from a, broadly speaking for a moment, if we think of the professional school environment, one change we'll see is, I think, an even greater number of schools and universities will offer blended degree programs or fully online degree programs for master's degrees. I think people have a greater sense of community. They may be less willing to move across the country for a specific program. And if they can retain that flexibility and learn at home, I think they certainly will. From an undergraduate perspective, and I'll talk about Yale specifically, because I do think you will see some undergraduate institutions begin offering online degrees at the undergraduate level, perhaps moving to a 3-year in residence, 1-year remote model. I don't expect Yale will change in either of those directions. Yale will still be a 4-year residential undergraduate college. However, I do think you'll see a greater use of digital learning materials in residential classes so that students are consuming, if you will, some of the learning materials outside of class. So when they come together, that time truly is active and in some sense sacred. We are using that time together to have a dialogue, to discuss, to debate, and really understanding what are the purposes of coming together to learn, and when and what can we learn independently on our own with some level of flexibility. So I do think you will see a change in the way faculty members approach a curriculum or course design, if you will. That's just at the broad level. I'll let Alice answer if you'd like.
Alice?
I think for us, for my staff, they're going to use some of those tools, you know, a little more frequently, even in the classroom, to showcase, you know, best practices and to highlight things that kids are doing. And for my parents, you know, Zoom has been a lifesaver, I think, for us to communicate with parents, even our non-English speaking parents. So when I had my PTA meetings for the last 2 months, you know, I divided it up so that I could meet with the Mandarin speaking parents, and I had someone translate, then the Cantonese parents, and then I had someone translate, and then the all English, you know. So, and normally in our school, coming for PTA meetings was dribbles, because they would be trying to go home in order to have dinner ready and to get the kids ready for bed at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. But the Zoom meetings have been like our most popular things. We had like 80 parents, and, you know, which is unusual. So, you know, I think in that sense, anytime we'll have these kinds of meetings, you know, we would use Zoom if the DOE allows us, so that we can reach out to parents across the school and at different levels. So
yeah, this is a very interesting issue. By the way, I run an investment banking firm, and we started using video conference and Zoom and WebEx 5 years ago, because we felt that that was a way to make our business more efficient. And it made sense. If you have a client in Brazil who's got some senior executives in Sao Paulo, some in Rio de Janeiro, they're happy if people don't have to get on planes. So I think there's an underlying change that's technology driven that would happen no matter what. And one of the real questions is, will technology help in this regard? Will we have 3D worlds where your avatars, where you can talk to your classmate and talk to your professor and so forth? You know, who knows, right? My son went to Yale and graduated a couple of years ago. In his senior project, he designed and built an ability to project people in actual 3D, capturing in one place and having them projected in 3D live in a different location, right? You could walk around and so forth. So these things too will change, but who knows, right? But certainly right now, we looked into these 3D things, and right now they use so much bandwidth, it's so much computer power, you know, it's just not practical. But, you know, who knows, right? One day we're all going to be sitting next to each other in a virtual world and be able to talk to each other. You don't know. Let me open it up if there are any questions. Again, I'm going to remind those people who are attending that if you have a question, just put it either in the Q&A or in the chat function. Let me see, there's one here I see. Let's see. Okay, here's one question. Wi-Fi and high-speed internet in both rural communities and urban centers. What remedies and solutions would you suggest, especially with families that have multiple children, students of different age groups with limited number of devices and or limited access to sufficient bandwidth to accommodate multiple users? You know, Alice, you were partly touching on that, but let me open that question up to both of you.
I think for us, again, we're just trying to advise parents to at least get as much from the DOE that is free, you know, before we then try to distribute what we have from our school. They actually have had frozen our budget in order to purchase equipment right before school started. And hopefully now they'll open it up so that we can at least, replenish some of the machines that the kids had used, and that we have to either replace totally. But I think it's important that they have access with the bandwidth, more bandwidth, because I know that in rural areas, I've seen pictures of teachers going to the local library or to other places in order to be able to do their teaching virtually. So I think that's something that telecommunications has to work on.
Lucas, any
Absolutely.
comments?
Yeah, absolutely, Angela. This is such an important question because it's a staggering problem in this country that's just been highlighted by this pandemic when you see how it's affected, particularly students K through 12. And I can't imagine, Alice, just listening to some of the challenges that you and your families are dealing with. It's heartbreaking, quite honestly, some of them. This is an area where you say, how do we come out of this pandemic? Like, how are we going to choose to come out of this? And we're going to need to be bold. We're going to need to have vision. We need public-private partnership. We need to be flexible and understand we have got to roll out high-speed internet and Wi-Fi across this country, low cost or no cost for every single citizen. It is an absolute necessity at this point. And I think many of us knew that before 2020, but that is without question right now. When you see the difference in quality of life that means for a student in rural Wyoming as it does for someone in Fairfield County, Connecticut. So this has got to be an important priority once we come out of this pandemic. Just to answer the question from Yale's perspective, one of the many great programs at Yale College is, of course, the first generation low income student programs, where we're really focused on providing safe and secure environments for students who need that this semester. So any student, regardless of class, who feels that they're not in a safe learning environment, perhaps they have food insecurity at home, they don't have reliable internet, they are welcome back to campus. And the hope is that those students will be on campus so they have the tools that they need, not only software, but also hardware. There are a number of programs where students can apply and they can receive some of at least the basic minimum of hardware that they need to connect and engage in their classes. But this is a problem that Yale is fortunate enough to be able to solve for their limited number of students. And it's one of the areas where I hope Yale and many other educations of higher institution will take a leadership position to ensure it's solved for really every student and every child across the country.
Wonderful answers. I think you guys have answered so many questions, answered so many of my questions so well. We don't have as many questions from the audience, but that's because I think you've done such a good job. I want to end, though, because we're 2 minutes away from the end, with just one comment. I do have the privilege of running an investment bank for which half of what we do is all life sciences. So it's pharmaceuticals, medical devices, biotech, and actually we're very fortunate that the immediate past deputy commissioner of the FDA, in charge of 80% of the FDA, all drugs, devices, is a senior member of my firm. So we have an unusual knowledge about what's going on with regard to COVID-19, but also all of the remedies that are being worked on, whether it's vaccines or cures and so forth. And I just want to comment because the trajectory of the future of where things head and what cures and happen will have a dramatic effect on the lives of both of Lucas and Alice, in terms of what you're doing, because it does matter if this thing's still going on a year from now versus if it gets better in the next couple months. We all realize that if you think back in February when it first started, a lot of people said, well, I'm hoping it'll all be cleared up by the summer. And here we are with surges in so many states. I'll just comment the following, which is, I'm generally an optimist, but I want to comment on the following on the science. They're working on vaccines. There's a great deal of uncertainty about vaccines. And one, it takes a long time to develop and test them for safety and efficacy. The shortest time frame in history for developing a vaccine was the vaccine for mumps, which took 4 years, just to give you some idea. But there's the other issue, which is how long does the vaccine keep you protected? They don't know how long the antibodies stay active to protect you. If it's 6 months, that's very helpful. If it's only 2 weeks, it's going to be a failure because you can't take a vaccine every 2 weeks. The other, they are doing a good job of finding drugs that will shorten the severity of the disease, and they're way off. You know, you're way off when it comes to a cure, right? There's one other avenue, one company that we're helping finance is something called innate immunity, which is your natural nasal and lung system that has a separate immunity system that if you boost it will fight off respiratory viruses such as COVID-19. But I want to just say I'm an optimist in general, but right now it's very uncertain by the people in my firm as to when we're going to have a science-based way out of this. Masks, testing, tracing, those things we can do, but we're not doing enough. But the science side, they're trying very hard, but it's just not clear when they're going to come out with things that really are safe that solve the problem. So I'm sad to say that the things that Alice, you, and Lucas have to deal with, there's a possibility you're going to have to deal with it for a while, right? Which would be unfortunate, but that's just, I think, factually realistic. So I want to thank our two panelists. I have to say, those of you who are attending, I think you will agree, they've done a wonderful job of covering a difficult topic. I want to thank both of you, really an excellent job. This is being recorded and will be available for those of you who want to watch it like Netflix, over and over again, okay? So thank you all, and we will all look forward to having you watch one of our future Yale career panels or Yale career fireside chat. Thank you very much, all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Stay safe.